I invite you to pray with me. Our gracious, kind, and always present Lord, thank you for your promise that you are near to the brokenhearted and that you save those who are crushed in spirit. We have had to trust these words are true because in recent days we have not always felt them in the midst of our loss. We invite you to our presence as we have gathered to honor our fallen brothers. We ask you to show yourself among us today. Quiet our hearts that we might remember, move our hearts that we might reflect, and open our hearts that we may receive. Amen. You may be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Governor of the State of Minnesota, Tim Walz.
Good afternoon. Senator Smith, Congresswoman McCollum, Congressman Emmer, Speaker Hortman, Leader Dowd, members of the Minnesota Senate, Minnesota House, civilian leadership, thank you for being here to honor these warriors, their families, and their unit. General Jensen, military leadership, thank you. On a day like this, the weight that you bear on a daily basis for the rest of us is apparent. The leadership that the state of Minnesota shows, the care and dignity for each and every one of our warriors and their families is something as Governor of Minnesota, as a father and as a son and as a brother, I'm grateful for each and every one of you of what you do. To the families of Kort and Charlie and James, you now hold the highest place of honor in this nation's society. I know it's a place you never wanted to be. It's a debt of gratitude that can never be repaid. Words pale to the pain you're going through. The peace and security that your fellow Minnesotans feel and the bliss that they can go about their lives today is a price that you've paid for that will not get a lot easier and will not weaken, but our commitment will not weaken to making sure that the memory of these warriors, the memories of these sons, these husbands, these brothers, are forever on our lips and on our minds. To the extended family of Charlie Company, I too thank you for the service that you give every day, a service that maybe most Minnesotans don't know, don't understand the risks, don't understand the benefits that come from that service. And that's a gift that you provide them, a gift of security, a gift of contentment. I ask all of you as extended family, lean on each other, understand what you're feeling now, and it's so difficult, I know, because those who don't understand what's happened here, those that don't understand the void that's been left in this unit, that this will forever be a part of the lore of Charlie Company. It seems to them that December 5th was already a long time ago. For each of you, it's in this moment, it's today. And that's not going to get a whole lot easier. But the one thing that we know we have is each other. This unit's excellence is well known. The mission is now more critical than it's ever been. This is a group of people that understands it can be a dangerous world, and those that don't honor that freedom, that don't honor that liberty that you so proudly and so selflessly give is going to be needed today, tomorrow, and in the future. So while today is incredibly painful, the hole that's been blown into this unit by the loss of these friends, by these leaders, by our neighbors in many cases, can't be replaced. But know this, the state of Minnesota, and you can feel it, and you could feel it at the time in the moments after this tragic accident, the state of Minnesota understands that you're the best that we have to offer. They understand that your example of selfless service and servant leadership is what we all ascribe to. So as we take time today to pay homage to the 3 warriors who boarded that aircraft like they had so many other times to do this state and this nation's business, our pledge to you as the state is to provide you everything necessary for you to complete your mission. Our pledge to you as the state to make sure we stand with this family and with the National Guard family. And we do it because it takes a few brave individuals who are willing to know what it means to step onto that aircraft and know what can happen, to give the rest of us that very precious gift of freedom. So to the families, I hope you may find peace in the fond memories. I hope you will know the example set by Kort and James and Charlie is ones that we will all try to live up to. And I hope that you may find peace in God's blessing. May God bless each and every one of you of this unit, this great state, and the United States. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Adjutant General of the State of Minnesota, Major General John Jensen.
To the members of the Rogers family, James, Beth, and Candace, the Nord family, Kaylee and Lydia, Charles and Monica, James, Tiffany, Lisa, and Jeff, the Plantenberg family, Laura, Stephen, and Isabella. I carry the condolences to your families on behalf of General James McConville, the Chief of Staff of the United States Army, General Joe Lingell, the Chief of the National Guard Bureau, Lieutenant General Dan Hokanson, the Director of the Army National Guard, and the over 13,000 soldiers and airmen of the Minnesota National Guard. Please know that we stand with you and remain steadfast in our commitment to you and our fallen brothers, James, Charles, and Kort. A year ago this month, I had the opportunity, the honor, the privilege to visit Charlie 2 of the 211th in theater in the CENTCOM AOR. And as a token of my visit, the chain of command gave me this wonderful unit camp, NorthStar Dustoff. So in tribute to our fallen, out of respect for Charlie 2, the 211th, and in solidarity of the NorthStar Dustoff, I put your cap on. I look over at the governor, and he's incredibly jealous at this kick-ass unit hat that I have on right now. Because governor loves a good hat for obvious reasons. And I've got a kick-ass unit hat right now, and I'm very proud of. So a year ago, CSM Wortham and I came and visited Charlie 2, the 211th, there in CENTCOM, and you gave us the normal unit briefing that always takes place. Not that you really had a choice, because that's what you do when you're in theater. You host senior officers and senior NCOs, whether you want to or not. But you went so beyond that afterwards. You gave CSM Wortham and I the opportunity to sit down with you all, the opportunity to spend time with you, and the opportunity to talk to you and get to know you just a little bit more. And you even hosted us at the infamous Dusty Bean. Now, the Dusty Bean is kind of a knockoff off of a knockoff. In the CENTCOM AOR, they have this thing called the Green Bean. It's a coffee shop. It's a knockoff of Starbucks, Caribou, whatever you like. And Charlie 2 of the 211th had their knockoff called the Dusty Bean. I've got this great picture in my office of Major Nathan Burr and I standing out in front of the Dusty Bean. And so I got to hear a little bit about the history of the Dusty Bean. And while I'm not qualified to tell the entire story of the Dusty Bean and that high-performance espresso machine that made the Dusty Bean possible, here's what I remember. What I remember is that espresso machine had deployed with the unit before. And like some of our equipment, it had never really been unpacked. And because it never really got unpacked, maybe it was in a small state of disrepair. But when it was time for the unit to deploy again, somebody thought of that espresso machine, gave that espresso machine some love and attention, brought it back to life, packed it up, and it went into theater with you. And a short while later, the Dusty Bean was created. And with that, a unit gathering space was created where the day's events could be talked about, where friendships could be made, and friendships could be nourished. The Dusty Bean seems like a little thing in the grand scope of a unit's deployment far from home and family and in life in general. But that espresso machine and that coffee shop was much more than maybe you can see from close in. For a trained outsider, it provided a forceful statement about your unit, the NorthStar Dustoff. It spoke of traditions that we hold dear in our Army culture and that we honor in our Army culture. A remembrance of the unit's history and tradition. That espresso machine had gone with us before, so it's going again. A fundamental belief that we are strongest when together. So a space was made so we could gather and be together. A belief that the best stories, or at least the best Army stories, are always told over a beverage, even if that beverage is just a cup of coffee. And of course, maybe an opportunity to make a little money off of visitors like Command Sergeant Major Wortham and I. But when Wortham and I left that day and spoke about our visit, we both agreed that we had visited a top-notch U.S. Army outfit. We could feel and see your closeness. We knew that you were a tight-knit group of professionals, a unit that was proud of their mission and proud of its ability to accomplish their mission, a unit that had great confidence up and down the chain of command, a unit that trusted its chain of command. Any soldier in the United States Army would have loved to have been part of that unit at that time. And even though you've been separated physically from that AOR, the 1,400 hours of flight hours are in the past, the 250 live medevacs, and the over 300 people that you evacuated, that unit is here today. That unit is here today possessing the same characteristics and strengths that I observed a year ago. The closeness remains, maybe more so today than ever before. The unit pride remains strong. That was evident at each visitation and funeral I attended. And I know the trust remains, because without trust, there can be no pride and no unit cohesion. Now, someone may ask, how can you see all that from one short visit and one small cup of coffee? I can tell you, you can't miss it. It's like a flashing red light when you come across it, because it doesn't exist in every unit. And I can tell you, it's on display again today. And so today we're here to honor Chief Warrant Officer 2, James Rogers, Chief Warrant Officer 2, Charles Nord, and Warrant Officer Candidate Kort Plantenberg, and to pay respects to their families and to their unit, Charlie 211th, NorthStar Dustoff. We've come together again today to be with you, to tell you that we love you. I've seen this unit during tough, stressful times before, and I saw your strength. These have been hard weeks, but you're making through it together as a unit. Not everyone at the same speed, but that's okay, because we're together. An air medevac mission is a difficult mission. Your mission requires a level of resiliency that most units never need. To quote your former commander in a U.S. Army Public Affairs article published during your last deployment, our medics do this because they love helping people. They love their service. They love taking care of people. I'm slightly biased, but the medevac mission to me is the best mission in the military, because we don't take lives, we save them. And though it seems unfair that a unit committed to saving lives would suffer this tragedy, we know the truth is that what we do is dangerous. Whether we do it under fire and combat conditions, during training or during routine operations. We do hard things, and we're able to get through these hard things and these hard times because we do them together. And whether you're part of a flight crew, a fire team, or an operations cell, you are stronger together than you are apart. And today I remind you, be together now. Mourn together, be resilient together, and heal together. In the book of my faith it is written that love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. Our love of James, Charles, Kort, and one another remains our strength and gives us strength. May God watch over each and every one of you. May he give you strength as your hearts heal. May he continue to bless the United States of America with patriots like Chief Warrant Officer 2 James Rogers, Chief Warrant Officer 2 Charles Nord, and Warrant Officer Candidate Kort Plantenberg, their families, and the members of NorthStar Dustoff.
Ladies and gentlemen, the commander of Charlie Company 2211th General Support Aviation Battalion, Major Bill Alms.
Governor Walz, General Jensen, other distinguished visitors, on behalf of the soldiers of Charlie Company 2211th GSAB, I want to thank you for paying tribute to our fallen brothers in arms. To the families, we are so honored to have you here with us this afternoon. I cannot, as your commander, say anything to lessen the impact of losing these three warriors. I can only pray that my words may honor their memories of our friends and offer each of you some hope for the road ahead. You know, I've always been taught as a new commander, the best thing you can do is to listen, observe, ask questions during the first month or so before you set out to make on any major changes or start any new initiatives. So as Charlie Company Forward and Rear came together back in late October for the first time post-mobilization, that's just what I did. Through my observations, I learned of many great accomplishments that the NorthStar Dustoff had compiled while mobilized in the Middle East. I also saw camaraderie as the rule and not the exception in the unit, as well as a strong family support network that existed here. I reunited with some old friends, began to meet many new faces that had been in the unit since the last time I was in Charlie Company a long time ago as a young lieutenant. You know, I've shared this story with several of you since the accident, but I wanted to share it again because as I reflect on the last few months, this is one of the single thing that has had the greatest impact on me. As I was going through my observation, I asked the question, who are the leaders in this company? Who can be counted on to do the right thing and accomplish the mission, no questions asked? Who are the people that are looked up to by their peers? The names Rogers, Nord, and Plantenberg were among the top names listed by each person that I talked to in the company. The thing was, I asked these questions back in November. It's clear to me it was not a coincidence that James, Chuck, and Kort were three of the best that Charlie Company had to offer. On December 5th, time stopped at some point for all of us. The news of a missing helicopter froze us in our tracks as we anxiously awaited more information. Eventually, the reality began to set in that we lost three of our heroes, three of our best, three of our friends. We joined the military, maybe more specifically medevac, for various reasons. But as those in Charlie Company can all attest, once you're here and you experience your first medevac, you become addicted to the mission. In Minnesota, you also become addicted to the team and the dedication and the professionalism of the men and the women standing next to you. The Dustoff motto, "So others may live," becomes your passion. There's something that we understand about our mission that outsiders just can't grasp. We're bound together as friends for a purpose larger than ourselves. I have no doubt that James, Chuck, and Kort had this passion for the medevac mission, for each other, and for us. It didn't matter whether there was a patient on board the day of the accident. Their dedication to maintaining the fleet to keep us mission ready and execute whatever future mission we were called to perform was equally as important and will be how they are remembered. Ronald Reagan once said, "Some people live a lifetime and wonder if they'll ever have made a difference in the world. A veteran does not have that problem." Friends, the difference these men made in the lives of so many has become abundantly clear over the last month. I ask you to carry on their legacy and let the light they shine into our lives, no matter how long or brief, inspire us to honor them in everything we do. Charlie Company, I know sometimes it's hard to see how loved, cared for, and supported you are when you're in the inside of the circle. Sometimes we take for granted the friendship and the camaraderie that exists within this unit that General Jensen and Governor Walz described. Let me tell you, there's something really special about this NorthStar family. Don't take for granted the men and women standing beside you. There will be many hard days ahead. Lean inward, build each other up, look out for each other during this time of grieving and rebuilding. To the families, one of the greatest tragedies is to lose a son, a brother, a husband, and a father. Please accept our deepest sympathy as we continue to lift you up in our thoughts and prayers daily. You are now part of our family, and we are dedicated to supporting you long after the memorial services end and the music fades. Please know you are always welcome here, and we hope to see you again soon. So, Charlie Company, think not so much of moving on, but of moving forward. And as you move forward, do so with our warriors by your side and in your heart. They are apart from us now, but I say again, move forward with them and continue to engage in life because of their inspiration and because of their sacrifice. Chief Warrant Officer 2, James Rogers, Chief Warrant Officer 2, Chuck Nord, Warrant Officer Candidate Kort Plantenberg. Rest easy, gentlemen, for your work here is done. NorthStar Dustoff will carry on the mission from here until we see you again in the halls of Valhalla. We'll now hear from Chief Warrant Officer 2 Kyle Braun, a friend of Chief Warrant Officer 2 Rogers.
Hello, folks. CW3 Braun. I'm honored to be able to speak for Tony Geyer today. Dear friends and family that gathered here today, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Tony Geyer, and James was my very best friend. I hope all of you are doing as well as you can after all that we went through this last month. I know for me, staying extremely busy has been the most helpful. I found that shoveling the driveway and sidewalks with the small shovel I own, instead of using a snowblower, it keeps me pretty occupied. I've begged my boss for extra trips that'll take me anywhere out of Minnesota. And I've tried sitting on the beach in Florida drinking festive drinks out of overpriced pineapples with a little umbrella that comes with them. I've adopted a cat who is identical to Bubba, a stray cat that was adopted overseas, who James said I could never bring into our room. All of those things in hopes to keep me so busy to forget what's really been going on. But putting the uniform on this morning and seeing all of you here today reminds me how real this actually is, no matter how busy I've tried to make myself, that this is part of my process, my closure, and that's okay. Today is the day I reluctantly began the rest of my life. I think today is hard because it's been much easier to mourn in silence. It takes away all of my silly worries about not being able to get my words out or even simply getting the right words out. But silence or not, one thing I can all appreciate today is being here all together, sharing in silence, sharing out loud the memories we all have of James, who we loved as a son, a brother, a nephew, an uncle, or friend. We will all have our own personal and special memories of the mark that he left in our hearts and on our lives. It's very hard for me today to be here, to hear my own thoughts out loud. Trying my very best to focus on the happiest times that James has brought to us, instead of him sitting next to me on a normal drill weekend. I am certain of two things, though. He absolutely hated being the spotlight or being the center of attention, but he would have wanted us to be here today with our happiest thoughts of our time spent together. And secondly, he is still here with us, very strong in spirit. James was such a strong person through his character, his personality, and his presence. We all here because somewhere, somehow, we have all been touched by James. I wouldn't be saying all the cliche things about how great he was, or how he was the best, or how he was kind, or how he'd give you his shirt off his back, how James would literally try to do everything himself without any help, because we would be here all day. All those cliche things are true about James, but if he was listening, I don't want to embarrass him in front of all of you. For me, he will always be with me. What I'll remember always will be that he loved to push my buttons and to get a rise at me as long as there was an audience. And also that he was better than me. It was obvious that he was better than me in anything that he did. But just in case I didn't know, he would make sure to remind me. We both came from artillery years ago to aviation before we met at the flight school board. Even back then, he had a sexier job as a ground pounder, and he was definitely better than me. When we started the state walks, the Warrant Officer Candidate School together, but in the third month, James was hand-selected to go to Fort Rucker to finish the Warrant Officer course at the federal program, obviously because he was much smarter and better than me, and he would love to remind me of that story. I swear he would never let that one down. Because James went to the federal walks, he got into flight school a few months before me, which made him better than me. I always thought it was really nice because he had recently finished something at flight school that I was just about ready to begin, and he was always so helpful in making me feel prepared in what was coming next. Because he finished walks before me, he pinned W1 before I was, so he always outranked me in time and service. He finished flight school before me. He tracked and made pilot command before me. You name it, James always finished one step ahead of me and was really better than me. We went to the medevac doctrine course at Fort Rucker, and James, he wasn't cheap, he was frugal. So he slept on my couch at my hotel for a few weeks, even though we were getting reimbursed for housing. We were roommates on this last deployment, where he loved to push my buttons. He would bring sand and rocks into the room and put them on the rug, knowing it drove me absolutely crazy. He would say, "I'm going to come in one day to the room, and you're going to have a tinfoil hat and duct tape. You're going to have a tinfoil hat on and duct taping all the nooks and crannies to the outside world, complaining about the sand." Even though I was cleaning up the sand, and he knew it would drive me bonkers, I could never get him to take his shoes off in the room because he would say, "Tony, you don't make the rules." Or, "You're not the boss of me." He didn't like to go to the gym or go to meals alone, so he would always wake me up to go with him. And if I wouldn't get up, he would squeeze himself between two mattresses beneath me until I said, "I'm up." I could tell silly stories about James all day, but the point is, since we met, he has always been there with me. And when I have this uniform on, James was either 2 steps in front or behind me. We did everything together. We talked about how we were going to go to Alaska this summer to visit his folks, who he talked about all the time. How we would get old one day and sit on the porch with our Kuwait veterans hat on, drinking coffee and yelling at the kids, "Get off my damn lawn." We talked about how he was going to follow in my footsteps and come fly corporate fixed wing with me. We were eventually going to pull the trigger and follow Kyle to the airlines. James said whatever airline I got myself into, he would just follow me, because if it was good enough for me, it was good enough for him. We chatted on the phone a lot like 2 old ladies outside a drill, because he always wanted to remind me that drill was coming up this weekend, like he was the only one who got the drill letter. But I appreciated it because I never really read the whole thing anyways. And he kept me very well informed. He also liked to call and chat about fixed wing ratings. He was always picking my brain about the best way to navigate to the company I work for and then off to the airlines. For once, I was better than James, and he was looking up to me. On December 4th, James called me while I was having coffee. When James called, I always answered, "You rang it?" And he would respond with, "You're on with the Bobcat." We talked for about 35 minutes about airplane stuff, upcoming drill, and how life was going. If I would have known that was going to be our last conversation, that's how I was going to say goodbye to my best friend, I would have talked until my battery went dead. It was just the norm for me to do everything with James. So here I sit, wondering what the new normal will look like, and thinking to myself, somebody has some big-ass shoes to fill. Those are a few things that makes James remain with me personally, and I'm sure that you have some very own special and private moments that you will cherish and keep close to your hearts. We were all extremely lucky to have had him in our lives, and as much as he will be missed by all of us, he will remain with us every single day, as long as we just remember, I love and miss you, Bobcat, past, present, and future. This isn't my goodbye, it's just another way of saying hello.
We will now hear from Chief Warrant Officer 3 Jennifer Otrumba, a friend of Chief Warrant Officer 2 Nord.
Good afternoon. I'm Jen Otrumba. I logged a lot of time with CW2 Nord, both at home and on deployments, both in the aircraft and on the ground. I would like to offer my heartfelt condolences to Chuck's family. Just to let you know, preparing for this memorial has been no easy task. I was asked to speak quite a while ago, and it took me to the very last second to think about what I wanted to say, put it on paper. I remember the first time I met him. Wade Olson, who's one of our full-time standardization pilots, called me and asked me to give him a no-notice evaluation on one of our new pilots. So recently, as I was thinking about what to write, I went through all of my messages that went back and forth between me and Chuck, and I looked at the first messages he sent me when he introduced himself as to who he was and that he would be flying with me. When I told Chuck he was going to get a no notice, he just said, "Okay, what does that mean?" Chuck's ability to go with it in any situation under pressure and do a good job. And in fact, his ability to face and overcome challenges while being the calm in the storm with a sense of humor through it was Chuck. That's how he was. I had the pleasure of also meeting Kaylee Nord at the ball that same year. We sat at the same table and immediately hit it off. We talked about arts and crafts while they talked about motorcycles. Motorcycles is basically all boys talk about, in case you guys don't know. I remember telling Kaylee that night how funny I thought Chuck was in our first interactions, and she laughed, and she said, "Yeah, I know." His amazing sense of humor is something that none of us will forget, and we'll all take a piece of that with us. Chuck is the person you want on your team, in your group, in the room. The Army is a bit challenging. I don't know if I have to tell anyone in this room that. I think we all can agree that we do some really silly things sometimes, like digging foxholes at annual training, as if that's something we do in aviation. Sitting on buses for hours only to stand in endless lines, eating some of the most inedible foods that they put in front of us. Most of the time doing all this in the rain, and the cold, and the snow, because that's the only time we do anything like that. I think we can all agree that it helps to have someone like Chuck with his sense of humor next to us when we're going through some of those silly things. I spent a lot of time with Chuck as my other pilot here in Kuwait and Taji. As a pilot in command or an instructor pilot, it's my job to teach. But the truth is, I learned so much from Chuck. He taught me how to relax on shift and introduced me to bed TV. He showed me his ability to nap just about anywhere. He tried to convince me that it's okay to just add more coffee to a cold Americano instead of making a fresh cup. He introduced me to some of the worst music I have ever heard, and I actually came to enjoy it. He convinced me and everyone else around that we needed a smoothie and a muffin from the Green Bean after running up aircraft because it was going to be better than the stuff they were going to feed us in the DFAC. And of course, Harry Potter. I've never met a man who was so into Harry Potter. I will never forget hearing him say frequently, "So, you want to watch Harry Potter?" Exaggerating events seems common in the Army. Tenderloin, I bet you'd agree. Although I never heard Chuck exaggerating about an actual mission that we had, he typically slightly embellished other events. For instance, have any of you had to wake him up? Every day at the same time, we had to run up aircraft, make sure they were ready for the day. So the mechanics would go out and they would do their job, and we would go out in pre-flight and run up the aircraft. And every day, I would have to wake him up to go out there with me. And I would try to quietly approach him and tell him, just sit there, just hold the controls, I'll do everything else, all you have to do is just sit there, and then you can go back to sleep. Well, one time I remember walking in after we ran up some aircraft, and I overheard him talking to some of our crew members that I had come in screaming, flipping mattresses, and screaming at him to get up. I said, "Chuck, that's not exactly how it happened." And then he tried to explain to me how this was actually a good thing. He says, "I'll be alert flying at night while you're sleeping, and you can be alert during the day while I sleep." Chuck, that's not exactly how it works. In Iraq, we had countless opportunities for excitement, or so he thought. Many times we were the backup crew and would run to the aircraft at the sound of medevac only to sit and wait for our brothers to launch, and we'd watch them go. But he always had his music on. He hated this and cursed Seth Ryman for being on my crew. Seth's one of our pilots as well. And it is true that it seemed that when Seth was paired with me, we flew an awful lot, and when Chuck was with me, we often had bad weather and a lot of downtime. Chuck did everything he could to tarnish Seth's reputation. He even coined him Fat Seth. To which had our medevac partners scratching their heads when they met Seth, because look at him. I would always eventually come out where Chuck would say that he truly loved and admired his friend Seth in a nemesis kind of way. Chuck had his opportunities, though. We had some challenging flights, challenging environments, challenging weather. He handled each flight with the same sense of humor he always did. I remember him talking to me one day after he came off shift. Actually, I think Kyle was telling me the story after they came off shift. Chuck was fast. He could get to the aircraft and have everything ready to go before Kyle and I could ever even get there. Really fast. And he was telling me about the mission they had the night before. And for those that don't know, with medevac, we have 15 minutes to get the aircraft off the ground. We had a long run up in Taji, Iraq to get from our office where we were sleeping to the aircraft. Well, this particular night, he was with Kyle, and he did everything he was told. He got out to the aircraft. He flew the heading that Kyle told him to fly. He had no questions or complaints. And it was only when they were airborne that he turned to Kyle and said, "So where are we going?" I have thought a lot about the funerals, all of them. And at Chuck's funeral, Elliot talked about puzzle pieces. Elliot spoke about puzzle pieces in the most beautiful and figurative way. Elliot's analogy really hit home for some of us. In the car leaving the funeral, I was talking to Canadian Jim, and we looked at each other and said, it was Chuck. Chuck had the puzzle piece. To put this into context, we did a lot of puzzles in Iraq, actual puzzles. We had a lot of time on our hands. Everyone was involved. They were massive puzzles that would take us days to complete. Chuck would play his music. We would dance into the late night, putting together puzzles and drinking coffee and tea. And when the puzzles were complete, there was always at least one missing piece. We had a lot of conspiracy theories about what happened to the last pieces of the puzzle. It couldn't have been Lieutenant Colonel Rivera, our critical care nurse, because he just seemed too honest. For a while, we thought maybe Jose, our friend from the Spanish Army, but he's just too sweet. It couldn't have been Jose. Maybe Jimmy James. He was pretty devious as well, but I can picture him giggling in the corner of the room, and he'd give away his secret for sure. Somehow Kyle's name never came up in the discussions because he was so quick to blame everyone else. Mostly we all blamed Canadian Jim, but he swore he didn't take the pieces. After listening to Elliot, I'm pretty certain it was Chuck. Part of me thinks for sure he's walking around with a bunch of puzzle pieces in his pocket while we're blaming everyone else. And if you find any of those pieces, they belong in Taji. The truth is that Chuck did take a piece of our puzzle. He took a piece of our hearts with him. And one day, only in Valhalla, will we get that piece back. We love you, Chuck. NorthStar Dustoff.
We will now hear from Sergeant Alex Hall, a friend of Warrant Officer Candidate Plantenberg.
Hello, and thank you all for being here today. Not that most of you had a choice to come to drill, but for our non-Charlie Company members, thank you for being here. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Sergeant Alexander Hall, and I've been with Charlie Company for almost 4 years now. It's crazy how time flies. Over the last 4 years, I've had the opportunity to get to know a lot of great people. One of those people being Kort. I got to know him over the years here at Charlie Company, but it wasn't until our most recent deployment that I actually got to know Kort. Through our time spent working together in Delta Company while we were in Kuwait, and through our time as coworkers and roommates up in Taji. To this day, I am forever grateful for the precious time I was able to spend with him. It's never easy to lose someone, especially a family member. To Kort's family, I'm not going to stand here and pretend I know exactly what you're going through. But what I can tell you is he was a brother to all of us and loved by many. To everyone that knew Kort, I'm sure that we all didn't know the same version of him. He was a lot of things to a lot of people. In the past month, I've had the pleasure of getting to hear a lot of people's stories and sides of Kort that I never really knew. And I'd like to share my version today. To me, Kort was a true outdoorsman. Whether he was fishing, his biathlon stuff, designing the next great smoker or grill contraption, or listening to his fishing stories over and over again, talking about boats, his boat, or boating stuff in general, or hearing him talking about TDI swapping literally everything under the sun. He most definitely had a passion for the outdoors and getting his hands dirty. I remember when we would often find ourselves talking about cars, whether it be stuff he wanted to do to his truck when he got home, fix his transmission, how excited he was to buy Billy's TDI because he was so excited about the fuel economy, or how he thought I would regret buying my car because he thought I should get a truck instead. Well, Kort, I'm here to tell you that you were wrong. I like my car. And not everything can or should be TDI swapped. To me, Kort was a man of precision, determination, and sheer will. If he wanted something, he went for it, and usually got it. But not by being given it, but by working his butt off for what he wanted. I remember when he was talking to me about wanting to go to flight school. He had gotten all the study books as soon as he could prepare for the SIFT, and obviously he must have done well for he got in. These attributes were also present in the maintenance he performed on a daily basis. Never once did I see him take a shortcut or have a lack of integrity when he made a mistake. He was always willing to stay late to get the job done, and a person always willing to help and do the right thing. An outstanding mechanic, and I have no doubt he would have made one hell of a pilot. To me, Kort was a prankster, someone always looking to laugh and make others laugh. Whenever anyone would play a prank on Kort, oh man, just get ready for the hell that was to ensue silently. That man had patience. Now, I can be known for pushing people's buttons, I won't lie, and eventually Kort got to know that about me. I remember Rabbit and I were always making jokes, whatever they may be, and Kort was no exception to our antics. Apparently, we had annoyed Kort, surprise, and the only reason that we found out is because he had photoshopped a picture of me and Rabbit as C-3PO and R2-D2 doing something. For those of you that know that picture, we'll leave it at that. And for those of you that don't know the picture, we'll leave it at that. To me, Kort was a brother, a man of undoubted service to his country and a friend. At times, it still doesn't feel quite real to me that he's gone. I still think I'll walk in this very hangar and hear the Red Hot Chili Peppers playing from a speaker, or hear, "Hey, Hall," in his very monotone voice. Kort, you died doing what you loved, flying high. I miss you, buddy, and I'll see you soon. Till Valhalla.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chaplain Dan Puliu, the 34th Expeditionary Combat Aviation Brigade Rear Detachment Chaplain, will now offer the memorial reflection.
The question we often find ourselves asking when we feel this kind of pain is, why, right? Why? Have you done this? I've heard it many times, and once again, I have to say, I don't know. Anyone who says that they can explain how the universe works does not know. And many people do, whether they're theologians and pastors or anti-theists or atheists or scientists or philosophers or anyone with a Facebook account often has things to offer. But when we are grieving and trying to comfort one another, we say many foolish things. At best, our understanding of why is only partly right, for even the wisest among us, for we are really only those who know in part, and these are not good times to speculate why. So I want to remind us of 4 simple, really self-evident facts that we, as we honor our fallen brethren, so that we might heal a bit and move another step forward to the new normal with empty chairs at our tables. And I say remind because these are things we already know in our heart of hearts, and we've already heard many of them expressed already as I call our attention to them. Number 1, life is fragile and precious. The breath I'm exhaling right now may cease before I sleep tonight. The person sitting next to you today may not be here next time we gather for something. That's fragile. It's short. Take a moment and look someone in the eye, or maybe next to you or right around you. Just really do that for a second. Just take a look at someone. That light, you see them? That little sparkle in their eye, that's life. And that is precious. Life is fragile and precious, and it's something we do with one another, isn't it? Second, I'll point out, ours is dangerous business. The military itself, particularly aviation, as we saw on December 5th, in simple training, as we've heard of reports of missile attacks in the Mideast this week in response to General Soleimani's death, and wondered how close to our loved ones they may have landed. As we've begun our routine of training and flying our aircraft again, this danger is part of our lives. And yet, third, life really is pretty simple. There is good and there's evil in the world, and we are good when we do good and when we cooperate with good, and many of us have sworn our lives to serve good purposes in this world without knowing the entire cost. It's a blank check in many ways, and when the cost of this service is more than expected and we willingly pay the bill anyway, that's when it becomes a sacrifice. And these sacrifices come in many forms. They come in the form of hard work and physical discomfort and many long times of separation from loved ones on both sides, here and abroad. This sacrifice comes in the form of heartache and sometimes in the loneliness of moral courage when you have to make decisions, and 1,000 different payments. But service and sacrifice are honorable and necessary for good to prevail in the world. And we have seen sacrifice paid in full by James, by Charles, and by Kort. The last fact, self-evident to us, life requires we live it together. Life really demands that we don't live it out in a silo and alone. There's way too much sorrow, and there's too much joy as well. I have been so humbled in the last 5 weeks to watch you take care of each other. So keep asking one another, how you doing? Sometimes it can seem hollow. Keep checking in on one another. Keep taking care of one another in those 1,000 different ways. And I might add, let others support you too. If you're one of the strong ones, which everybody really that I've been around is, but one of the ones who wants to be crusty about it, let others help you too. That honors everyone. We have to be givers as well as we have to be receivers. Can you imagine going through the last several weeks alone, any of you? unbearable. So let's keep taking care of each other, and now even more. I'm going to ask you to stand in a moment here, and I'm going to read Psalm 23, and I'm using it as our benediction too. So that's why I'm going to ask you to stand and remain standing now. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not lack anything. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the final roll call, firing of the volleys, the sounding of taps, and rendering of personal honors by the official party.
Chief Warrant Officer Walz. Staff Sergeant Soleimani. Staff Sergeant Ferguson. Chief Warrant Officer James Rogers. Chief Warrant Officer James Rogers. Chief Warrant Officer James A. Rogers, Jr. Chief Warrant Officer North. Chief Warrant Officer Charles North. Chief Warrant Officer Charles D. North. Warrant Officer Candidate Plantenberg. Warrant Officer Candidate Kort Plantenberg. Warrant Officer Candidate Kort M. Plantenberg.
At this time, the official party and senior leaders will render personal honors to the deceased. All others may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our memorial ceremony. Thank you for attending today. All personnel present may render personal honors at this time as the ushers direct you. Should you be unable to remain, you may depart now quietly. After all honors have been rendered, there will be a 10-minute break before the start of the private reception for Charlie Company, past and present, and the families. We ask that all personnel not in Charlie Company please make their way off the hangar floor prior to the start of that reception. Again, thank you for honoring Mr. Rogers, Mr. Nord, and Warrant Officer Candidate Plantenberg with your presence here today.